Hi, it's Larry Call from Change Agent Board. I'm excited to have you join our upcoming interview with George Kriza from Challenging Decisions. What we're going to talk about with George is how to turn vision into reality as a small business owner, as a founder or entrepreneur. I hope you enjoy the program. So, George, did you know that a $100,000 bill printed during the Great Depression with Woodrow Wilson's face on it was the largest denomination ever printed in history in the
I
US?
had no idea, Larry. I thought that was really interesting that you knew that little fact. And the closest I could get to that, one time I walked into my grandparents' safety deposit box at the bank. My mom sent me there, and would you believe I found a $5,000 bill and $3,000 bills, which probably sat there for 40 years. Think about that.
I've never seen that. I've never seen bills like that before, and this sounds a lot better than the Al Capone vault stunt that Geraldo Rivera pulled. Yeah,
It's
years back.
probably because of the Great Depression. They probably figured they needed to have money, and there it sat in that box, and no matter what happened, they had that money.
That was a generation, and the reason that I thought of this as the title for this particular series of episodes with you is that you started and sold a successful company. It's everybody's dream when they start a business. And sure, you didn't get a Woodrow Wilson, but you got Woodrow Wilson equivalents and money wired into your bank account. Um, so you want to tell us your story
Well,
about where
yeah,
you were and how you made that happen?
sure. First of all, yes, I definitely got sort of an equivalent of a few Woodrow Wilsons, as part of the deal. So that was gratifying. And as you hear the story unfold, I think you'll understand it's doubly gratifying that we got to that point. It was never a straight line. One of the things I found out, by the way, as a side note, was that I never quite realized that Uncle Sam and JB Pritzker were 30% partners with me in my business. So, tax considerations definitely come into play at some point or another. But at any rate, achieving a reasonable amount of success or great success, it can have more twists and turns than a good mystery novel. So, how did it work out for me? Well, in the beginning, I'd been working for other people until I was about 40 years of age. And probably for the five years prior to being 40, I was thinking about opening my own company. My background was I grew up in Berwyn, went to Morton High School. IIT was a college I attended. And I spent some time in the camera business. Then I joined Sony Corporation of America in the consumer sales group. I was number 2 salesman in the country one year and number 1 in the Chicago region. This was in the era of the Walkman and the Betamax and so
I
on.
remember.
Exactly. And I actually have met Akio Morita as well when I was at Sony. And then I joined a manufacturer's rep company that was a Pioneer rep, and my timing just couldn't possibly have been better. 90 days after I joined, we were awarded the Apple computer representation contract for the tri-state area. So we represented Apple for a 4-year period. I had the opportunity of actually meeting and working with Steve Jobs personally
Hmm.
on multiple occasions. We represented over 150 technology product lines during that 4-year period. Then I went on to be a regional manager for various Windows machine type companies. But during that very early period of time, we had to absorb very rapidly how to leverage technology, and then we actually educated and taught the public about what you could do with a PC. People always said, "Well, what am I going to do? Put my recipes on it?" So
Mhm.
we had to learn all the software and the operating systems, and we had to talk to them and train them via seminar method on how they could really take advantage in a very accessible way of the computer technology that was available at the time. So one thing that's really important that I got from this period of time, I feel, in my life, was both companies like Sony and Apple had powerful underlying visions and missions of what they wanted to accomplish. And there's actually a book called The Sony Vision. And we all know the power of Steve Jobs' speaking ability and the insights and the thought process that he brought to reinventing the world and the way the world used computers and technology. But it's a really interesting question, Larry, when you want to start a business. And if you just think about the questions you probably ask yourself, and you may have asked yourself back in the beginning, am I ready to open a business? What kind of business do I want to go into? Where do I start? Should I quit my job? Should I do this cold turkey? Really? I'm going to just drop everything and do this? If you watch Shark Tank, that's a question they ask right off the bat to these people that are looking for capital is, are you doing it full time and are you committed?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very important thing to ask yourself whether you're ready to make that level of commitment. And you also should ask yourself, do I have the skills necessary to pull it off? At some level, you're going to have a basic set of skills, but you're going to find out very rapidly there's so much more involved in operating a company as it grows that it'll put a lot of demands on you as a CEO. So sometimes, though, you need a push to get off the cliff. And in my case, I was in the computer industry for 13 years. I lost my job. It was a turbulent era. But I did feel I was ready. I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I picked up, though, instead of going to look for jobs in the help wanted section, I went to business opportunities. And I saw a couple that just caught my eye. One was with Rosenbluth Travel, which was the third largest travel agency at the time. They were looking for area representation. And then I found another company in Atlanta that had a really unique take on sales incentive certificates that were generally used as a throw-in when you bought furniture or appliance or something of that nature. So I had a start, and interestingly, I knew a lot of people, as you might imagine, having worked for two great companies for quite a long period of time, and then a few others. I knew a lot of people. And the minute I talked to them and they found out that I was involved with travel, they started asking me, well, we'd like to put some cruises out as prizes. Can you make arrangements for that? We'd like to take a group of people to a baseball game in Atlanta. Can you put that group together? And before you knew it, I was selling group travel incentives. Next thing you know, I had 100 winners from Proxima Corporation going to Cancun on a trip I planned and orchestrated completely. We took people internationally to Marbella, Spain. Both programs were successful. People loved what we did. Off to the races we were. We morphed from travel incentives to merchandise incentives. And then a really big moment happened when we were approved by First Chicago, which is now Chase, First Chicago, to issue debit card incentives. We were the third company, while still working out of my home with just my family. We were approved as the third organization to be able to issue debit cards for incentive programs. Well, that was a really big moment in the company. And well, we had to do some things we never had to do before. We had to build a software infrastructure to integrate with the bank. And I was fortunate enough, not only was I computer literate, but my 17-year-old son was able to actually do the mainframe integration with the bank in 1997. We launched our first program January 1 of 1998 with Proxima, which, by the way, remained our client for the full 25 years of my company's existence. Epson was next a year later. And by 2002, we had 17 major clients running programs on our platform with our team operating them. So that was really exciting. And I'd say our company had a head count maybe of about a dozen people by that point in time, but we were starting to grow. And then a really big opportunity presented itself. The number one computer reseller in the United States was very aware of us because of the relationship we had with some of their premier clients. And they wanted to take all of these independent incentive programs and merge them onto one debit card with their brand on it. And myself being who I am, I said, that's not what you want. I said, what you really want and what you really need is a business process management piece of software, which we'd never built before.
You didn't have the product yet after
No,
you sold
no,
it without the product.
absolutely did not have the product. But we conceived the product, which was absolutely spot on for what they wanted. And once they heard what we were proposing, they absolutely loved it. And what ended up happening is this piece of software allowed them to go from, let's say, 25 incentive programs independently pointing at their organization to 250. And that happened in under 1 year.
Mm.
So very exciting moment to design and invent and build a platform like that. We actually built the first generation of the platform, I would say, in 5 months, which was quite an interesting challenge. So because of all of this, it became a really big success. And our organic growth was already good, but selling that platform to that client put us into hyper growth.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew 473% in a 3-year period.
Mm.
Super exciting.
Sounds great, right?
Yeah, it sounds great, but and in many ways it absolutely is great. But what you're probably not prepared for, any of you who have been in anything close to that situation, you're really not prepared for the expectations of the client and the needs of the platform in order to live up to what you've conceived. Because you're where are you? You're at generation 0.5. You're at generation 1. And you have a product that launches. Well, because I was in the computer industry, I had taken note of a book I read a number of years prior called Crossing the Chasm by Geoffrey Moore. And Geoffrey Moore is definitely a marketing genius, very influential. He wrote 2 incredible books. One was Crossing the Chasm and the other Inside the Tornado. They go hand in hand, but you really have to cross the chasm at some level in order to get
inside the tornado
of growth.
Yeah.
So what I learned that I think is relevant to anyone building a product, delivering a product that is tangible, whether software or hardware product that involves technology, is to understand how companies build the product and deliver the product, and at the same time, how the marketplace views them and their product. And Geoffrey Moore lays that out just beautifully. So I learned about this all in practice in roughly the 2003 to 2008 timeframe.
So a book really had that powerful an impact on you. And as you think about where you are today, how is that book helping you with your challenging decisions consultancy practice?
Well, in the regard that it helps me assist CEOs understand where their company is and their product is at a given moment in time. And I would like to say this, this whole idea of the chasm. What's the chasm? Well, there's actually 2 chasms, you might say, rolled into one. The first chasm is the product ready for prime time? I'm going to say there's 3 chasms. Is the product ready for prime time? Is the organization ready for prime time? And then where does that organization, that product fit against the market dynamics that are there? And one thing we learn, and that CEOs should all understand, is that uh, larger clients are very risk averse. And so they're not terribly interested in putting themselves in a position to be a guinea pig. Now, there are some exceptions to that. And I'd like to show a chart, Larry, if I may, to talk from for a minute.
Great. So this is the technology adoption stages that we had talked about?
Yes. So you look at this chart from left to right, this is describing the marketplace. And when people come out with new technologies, individuals behave very differently with how they react. Individuals and clients behave very differently with how they react as you look at this chart. So when someone comes out with something really novel and interesting, there's a bunch of people that are either called early adopters or innovators, tech enthusiasts. People like that will buy products just because they want to tinker with them.
Mm.
Yeah, and try and understand, well, what is this new thing and how could it be used? Frankly, they couldn't care less whether it actually works.
Mm.
They just want to know what's going on in the market.
Sure.
And closely following them are what we call visionaries, that when you make the presentation, they actually have a use for the product. And they like to lead. They like to lead the market. And so in actually using and deploying new technologies or new products. And those are called visionaries and early adopters. So those people are willing to endure and know they're going to have to endure a fair amount of pain by adopting as one of the very first customers for a new product category. And then you see a thing called the chasm, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But once you get past that point, there is a thing called early majority. So your product has already been accepted and has begun to become mainstream. And so you can tell by the volume of the orange section of the curve, the volume tells you that that's a pretty big chunk of business right there. Mm-hmm. And you would love to have that chunk of business. But inside that chunk of business, are, especially in a B2B scenario, what you have are demanding clients that expect the product to work, that need a support infrastructure around the product, and that without that, it will fall on its face. And the one other thing I'd like to point out as a very big part of chasm theory is that the way people buy, especially when you get to the early majority, is big players know what's going on in their market. They watch one another. And so if we were to talk about the computer industry, which I'm familiar with, if the number one player deploys a product as they did in our case, guess what? Without ever having a salesperson set foot in their door or make a call, they already know that guerrilla client has bought and deployed the product. Mm-hmm. And guess what? They want to do it too. And so it's almost not even a matter at that point of sales resistance. If you can sell the gorilla, all of its big competitors are going to want to know what they're doing and how fast can they get on board. So that's really an exciting moment. So what is this chasm again? The difference in what the requirements are between the visionary segment and the pragmatist segment, the early adopters, early majority, it's really significant in terms of what's required. And as a result of that, your organization and your product has to grow up really, really fast. And I'm going to take the diagram down right now and keep talking about the situation. if I may.
It's very interesting. And my other company is called Call Sales Partners, and we're a business development firm. And what strikes me as I see this is how important it is, if we're going to work with a client, that we understand who we're talking to when we're trying to introduce our clients' products into the market. We better not be speaking innovator language if we're talking to conservatives.
Absolutely right. It's you may as well drive your Ferrari into a concrete wall at 120 miles an hour,
Not a good idea.
right? As
Mm-hmm.
but that's the point exactly, is because they don't care too much that it's a Ferrari. You know, they have roadblock after roadblock after roadblock that they're going to expect you to live up to
Mm-hmm.
in order to meet their kind of world and their kind of requirements.
That's right. So I'm thinking of it from that sales angle, and what you're talking about for a business owner is that as a management consultant, what you're saying is before they start to make challenging decisions about their company, where to invest, and what products to bring to market, and what direction they want to go in, they've got to be able to understand what phase they're in. And at
Yeah,
each
and I,
phase, what's needed at each phase.
yeah, and I could tell you this in my case, you know, real life, I saw it coming. This for me began in 2003.
You're
And
talking about you saw the chasm.
no, I understood the market dynamic, and I understood the changing dynamic of what was required from my company, which was MTC at the time. And in fact, I have still to this day, I have presentations I made to my management team to explain to them what these dynamics were and how we would have to react quickly as a company.
Mm.
Because what I like to share, and this is again super relevant to CEOs, when you get in a situation that looks like hyper growth could actually be at your doorstep, you have to ask yourself a question. How am I going to grow my business? I don't mean sell more. I mean, how am I going to grow and mature my company in order to meet the needs of dramatically increased demand? And I'm going to have to hire more qualified people, right? Here's another thought. Uh, the existing organization, which in our case was very small, we were at maybe 20 people at that point in time. Uh, there are so many new roles and so many new demands. You cannot hire fast enough and integrate people fast enough in order to deal with all the problems that suddenly are at your doorstep. And so Jeffrey Moore uses the illustration of a conductor of a musical orchestra. And so, you know, at this particular moment, the horns have to play. At this particular moment, the woodwinds have to play. And he's orchestrating continuously the roles that people play and how they play them and when they play them in order to meet the changing demands of the client base. So, what does that mean for the individuals in your company? That means that individuals, they can't think like big company people. They have to think super flexibly. That today I'm going to run customer service, and tomorrow I have to deal with quality control, and the next day I have to deal with client relations. And you know, they may or may not have all these skill sets. So you have to coach them and develop them very rapidly into being able to handle roles they never anticipated that they would have to fulfill. So the comfort zone goes right out the window during a period like this. And the organization, again, it has got to grow rapidly. And where are these new people and these more qualified people going to come from? They're often going to come from larger, significantly larger companies, stratified companies, bureaucratic companies. So you go from this entrepreneurial flex situation, bringing in a bunch of very skilled new people who are expecting a resource equation that does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
in your organization. So it's quite a challenge, and you have to figure it out. You're the CEO. You're running the program. And then the other thing you have to contend with is, do I have enough capital? Because, and this is again something that we ran into early on, is we were just going gangbusters and we were doing great. And we went from in a 6-month period from signing this gorilla client, we went from a very cash positive position. I want to say in 6 months we lost $500,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had the organization.
And I imagine you had never lost $500,000 before.
I wouldn't know what that meant. But this is the thing. I mean, I grew the organization to 37 people because I knew I had to have a bigger organization, but we could not. The revenue was not yet there to support that size organization, which is why people are going to look for a capital raise in many situations like that. And I would have to freely admit, it never occurred to me I should raise capital in 2003 or 4.
Mm.
So we did it organically, and that puts things into a whole different scenario, and the burn rate changes, and it's all out of proportion, your cash flow. And you're asking yourself, how in the world am I going to get from this visionary stage into the early majority stage? And I can tell you one thing. It will be, there's that movie, right? There Will Be Blood. It's a bloody, difficult process. It tests your skill, it tests your will, it tests your resourcefulness more than you would have ever imagined. And you know what else is going to happen? You're going to lose people, because you're not just burning cash, you're burning people out.
Mm.
And so you'll probably lose accounts in the middle of this big growth spurt, because you haven't quite figured out how to manage this level of difficulty. We lived through all of that, and we lost that big gorilla account after holding on to them for 4.5, 5 years. We lost it, and then you would think that's bad enough because they were a big chunk of our business. But then came 2009, which was the worst recession since the Great Depression. So in our case, we had to deal with a reduction in revenue of 40% in a year and a half, in the middle of making our largest capital investment that we would have far beyond what we would have ever thought we had to invest into the software platform. And we did a ground up rebuild. So we went from being a rocket ship. I mean, we were a rocket ship. I could hold up these plaques that I have, Cranes Fast 50. Mm-hmm. We were Inc. 500 company. And, just on a super high, we went from that rocket ship to being in the biggest debt position, bigger than I would have ever imagined. And there's a saying in building software that it takes twice as long and costs twice as much as you think. It's way worse than that. way worse than that. Maybe if you have your act together, it could get close to that. But for a lot of organizations, it costs 5 to 8 times what you think it's going to cost. And it may take not just a year or 2 years, it may take 5, 6, 7 years to fully flesh out your vision.
So as you look back, what I'm hearing from you is an individual with one company. You started after you had a lot of business experience and many years in already, who went through all of these things only one time. So every time you went through another phase, it was brand new.
Yes.
And you had to figure it out. Now you found one book that was helpful, which is great, but maybe not quite enough at the time. If somebody owns a business and they don't bring that experience of having started 10 businesses, 15 businesses. It's everything is kind of new to them. What's the context that they need to be operating in to be able to understand not only what happened to them, but what's about to happen to them?
Well, one thing I think when you and I were talking yesterday that we mentioned, a lot of CEOs, especially in smaller companies, the reality is they take what I would describe as an idiosyncratic approach to management. And what do we mean by that? We mean people are quirky. People have priorities that are their own personal priorities. They bring their own personal worldviews into their management style. Uh, I was in a networking webinar last night, and there was a gentleman who was a CEO of billion-dollar companies that participated in the webinar. He made a really interesting point. You need visionary management in order to make these kinds of things come together. 98% of managers, of owners, are functional managers.
They're not visionaries?
Not remotely.
That's very surprising to me. I would think most people who start companies are visionaries, and then they have trouble with the operations side.
They might have a little bit of vision as to, or I would describe it. They have a passion for a product, or they have a passion for a way of doing business that they just love what they do, and they have no problem being immersed in it. But they're not really what I would describe as students of a business practice and theory. You would hope that, I mean, certainly some are, but the ability to look farther ahead and anticipate what are the demands on my organization going to be? What are the demands in the finance group? What are the demands in sales? What are the demands in marketing? What are the demands in operations? How am I going to take the ragged edges of what I created and turn it into a solid, finely tuned, really well-running organization and operation? That's I hope I'm answering your question, but that's the devil. And a lot of times, if you were to ask someone as a consultant, why do you do it that way? Whatever it is, maybe I process a claim, or maybe I, have a customer interaction. Why do you do it that way? Well, that's the way we've always done it. That's going to be your answer. That's the way we've always done it. And have you taken a look at the process that you use and mapped it out?
Mm-hmm.
To figure out, well, I like the expression, sometimes the marbles are rolling around on the table, right? That's business. But you don't want the marbles to fall off the table, because they hit the ground hard, and sometimes they shatter, right? So what the CEO needs to be able to do is he needs to understand his business so well, and all the moving pieces of the business so well, at least at an executive level, so that he can understand how to deploy new process, new procedures, new operational elements in order to refine it to the point where the marbles quit falling off the table.
I think what's interesting about what you're saying is that if you're describing, tell me if I got this right, if you're describing most CEOs that founded small businesses as individuals that are not necessarily visionaries, but they're very good at a particular function or task or capability that they know how to bring to the market, maybe better than anybody else. Now you're asking them to do what you just described, which is to chart a course and map out a future, and make sure all the pieces are in place. You have an inherent contradiction in terms of what's needed and what the skill sets are in the company.
Without a doubt.
How do you reconcile that contradiction?
Well, in practice, one of two or three things will happen. either the business will ultimately fail because the CEO did not rise to the occasion, or the CEO will work very hard to develop their vision and to develop their skill set to be much more forward looking, or organizations that grow really fast and take outside capital end up replacing the CEO.
So you get fired by the people who buy your company, essentially.
Yeah, that's, and we went through a period where we were trying to raise capital, and we actually, because we were so highly leveraged at the time, we had one offer that after, all my years of time, effort, and energy and passion, I was going to be left with 5% of the company.
Well, luckily you didn't take that.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah. So sometimes you get the defining moments where you say, am I going to do it or not?
Mhm.
And I was bound and determined to fight every battle I needed to fight and improve my skills to the level that I need to improve them. And I would say, again, as we discussed the other day, having never done it before, how long did it take, George, to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, realistically, somewhere between 10 and 12 years to get fully calibrated with the right team, the right people, the right quality control, the right process management, so that the company ran really smoothly, the product ran really smoothly, the management team, and that's where it starts. The management team understood what effective working together really means.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked about what other books are very influential for me, and they include the Patrick Lencioni series, particularly the 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive and the 5 Temptations of a CEO. That, along with 4 Disciplines of Execution, those books put it all together in terms of understanding how profound a really good culture is to success, and also the discipline required to hold the organization accountable to achieve quarter by quarter not only revenue goals but functional goals as to how you're going to make that company better.
We've got our contact information up on the screen here. If anybody's interested in getting in touch with me, if you think you're a good fit as a board member on one of our series to talk about some of your expertise with relevant audience, you can contact me. If somebody wants to reach out to you, George, what can you offer them at this point?
Well, the website is challengingdecisions.com. The phone number is 312-320-7760. And what we can offer them is an introductory discussion to understand where they're at with their business, what problems are troubling them. I absolutely feel like small to mid-sized organization, and by the way, my consulting target is everything from, similar to what you described, is everything from entrepreneurs to SMB CEOs to lower middle market CEOs. So it's quite a line. And the fact is, the smaller the organization is, the more likely they are to benefit from a trusted advisor. And so, people that are looking for a trusted advisor that has been through things before, that has a wide variety of expertise that could be very relevant across some of the areas we described, I'd encourage them to give me a call, and I'd be happy to discuss how we proceed.
I think that I'm laughing as you're talking about who needs it the most, and it's usually the people who don't want to spend any money on anything that need it the most. And
I'm actually glad you brought that up, Larry.
And as someone in that position, who has been in that position myself, I have always hired experts to help me in areas where I don't want to be an expert or feel like I'm not an expert, as opposed to trying to figure it out myself, even when there was a stretch to do that financially. And I'd strongly encourage people to take what I just said very, very seriously. It'll take you years and years if you'll ever figure it out. Whereas if you bring in someone who knows what they're doing, regardless of what the subject area is, you're going to get there a lot quicker. And then I'll add one more thing about making the decision about who to bring in. Make sure they've done it, that they've lived through it, they've felt that pain. They're not learning about what they're teaching you from a book or from an MBA program, and that they've done it in the same kind of environment that you're in. Being 30 years at IBM and leaving IBM to become a consultant for 10, $20 million companies is not something that's going to make a ton of sense.
Yeah, if I may, with maybe two final comments, the most difficult period in my earlier company's history that we were talking about, 2003 to 2008, I had 3 Northwestern MBAs and 1 University of Chicago MBA. It was the worst management of entire history. And I would have never thought that. I was going exactly for, improving the organization. And, you just can't go by a title, or a degree. You have to go by accomplished success. You're absolutely right. And then the other thing I was just going to say, agreeing with you, you have to be willing to invest in your company. And and again, my type of consultancy is extraordinarily low cost. It's not McKinsey. It's not, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's very, very affordable. And whether it's investing in a consultant or investing in your business, either way, they're both investing in your business. If you're not investing in your business to make it better and improve the way you do things and improve your products, you need help. It's my opinion, because today's profit does not equal tomorrow's success.
That's true, especially right now. And if anybody's interested, George has a blog series I've read. It's very, very interesting. It's helped me as well as this discussion has. Up on his website, you've got that address if you want to go to that. Thanks, George. I really appreciate you joining. We'll be back. We're going to do a series of shorter episodes. They're going to be very specific with ideas and tips that you can use once you identify which episode is relevant to you. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well on those episodes.
Thank you very much, Larry. I appreciated having the conversation with you.
Thanks again.